Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about types of water pipe, supply, and drain. We'd like to thank Patty Kilgore for liking and sharing the podcast. So the Roman aqueducts in 312 BC had really good water supply. So they were carrying about 200 gallons per person of water a day to Rome.
Wow.
It's about 90 miles from the mountains. Pretty amazing, huh?
Mm-hmm.
In the 1650s, Boston built the first water system to be used by the fire department. And most of this water supply, they used hollowed out trees to supply the water. In 1829, Boston's Tremont Hotel was the first hotel to have indoor plumbing. 1829. 1869, Chicago built the first city water tower. And then in 1933, faulty plumbing at the Chicago World Fair led to an outbreak of dysentery and killed almost 100 people.
That's a bummer.
If you have an older home, you may have galvanized pipe, so it's silver and gray in color, and in homes built between 1930 and 1960, and depending on the neighborhood, they went a little longer, but it's zinc-coated steel pipes, which were a fantastic upgrade from the lead pipes.
Okay, they didn't think steel and water was going to be a problem?
Didn't have a lot of choices back in the 1930s. But over the years, that zinc coating slowly erodes, and then it starts to rust and corrode, so minerals can accumulate inside the pipe. It'll reduce your water flow. And a lot of the old homes we worked in here around Chicago, we would cut out sections, especially on the hot water side, and the opening in these pipes, amazing how small it was. So you can start to replace those if you have an older home and replace it with CPVC, PEX, or copper. And just
explain all those, right?
Sure, okay. And you can do sections at a time if you don't want to do a whole project. And if you're making repairs to galvanized pipe, you're going to need a pipe wrench or two, which makes the job a lot easier. Or you can also use large adjustable pliers for small projects. And this is
how large?
So I would say if you only plan on changing some shutoffs and doing a few small projects, I would probably only just need an adjustable pliers. But if you plan on doing major renovation and you're going to be changing bathroom fixtures and slowly replacing pipes, I would have a couple of pipe wrenches. It's just going to make the job much easier if you have galvanized pipe throughout your house. So the galvanized pipe is going to be threaded on each side, and it's going to insert into these fittings, and you're going to have a variety of fittings that's going to allow you to change direction with these pipes and connect them. And the main thing with galvanized pipe is you're going to need unions to connect long sections of pipe together.
Right.
So this is a three-part fitting. One part screws onto one pipe. You have the other part that screws onto the pipe you're connecting, and then there's a large nut that pulls this together. And the one thing with a union, which a lot of people don't know if they're just starting to work with galvanized pipe, is you want to use pipe dope or pipe thread compound on the outside of the union, but that main large nut, there's soft metal that connects the two ends, and you never want to use pipe thread or Teflon tape in the center where that large nut is.
Why not?
Because it could potentially cause it to leak. They want that metal against metal because it's very soft. And if you didn't use a union, when you're screwing in a long piece of pipe, or a short piece of pipe too, when you're screwing in one side, it's unscrewing the other side. So with lengths of pipe, you need a union. And then whenever you're connecting galvanized pipe to any other fitting, you always want to use Teflon tape or pipe thread compound to seal it and prevent the water from following those male threads when it's under pressure and leaking. And Teflon tape now is going to be marked PTFE, or it's going to be because DuPont stopped allowing their trade name, Teflon.
So, yeah, that's right.
So DuPont owns Teflon.
Right.
So now you're only going to see PTFE tape, or it's going to say pipe thread tape instead of Teflon tape. But Teflon tape, or PTFE tape, is designed to be wrapped clockwise. So as you're looking at the pipe, you want to wrap it clockwise, and you want to wrap it 3 full times, and it's designed for the density to seal the pipe thread. The other thing you can use on galvanized pipe is pipe thread compound, and if you're buying pipe thread compound and you get this in small little squeezy tubes, I would get it with PTFE, and this is going to be able to be used on any type of pipe, whether it's gas, water, or plastic pipe. If you get the standard pipe thread compound, it can actually damage plastic pipe. And
What's pipe dope?
So pipe dope is what a lot of plumbers will call pipe thread compound. So this is for galvanized pipe, black pipe, and it just does a great job because it's very easy. Because if you forget to wrap your Teflon tape clockwise, or if you forget it needs 3 full times around the pipe, you can screw up. If you put it on backwards, it can ball up and tear, and then it's not effective. But with pipe thread compound, you just put this on the male thread, you screw your fittings together, and then you wipe off the excess, and it's goof-proof. So I really like the pipe thread compound a lot.
So you don't have to put that on clockwise?
Right, yeah, just put a lot on and screw it together, man. If you're connecting galvanized pipe to copper, you should use a dielectric union, and this is going to have a plastic and rubber spacer to prevent the two metals touching each other.
Right.
So you get electrolysis, which causes the galvanized pipe to corrode.
That's a bummer.
And it's amazing how quickly, sometimes in a few years, you can see it start to rust up and corrode.
So one side of the union is galvanized, the other side is copper.
One side is going to have a copper side that you sweat on, and you have to be careful. There's going to be that plastic spacer that you need to pull that collar down and away so you don't melt it while you solder it on, and then you tighten it on. You just thread it on the other side with the galvanized. And yeah, it's amazing how something like that, what a simple fix, huh?
Yep. So in the store, a lot of times the copper pipe isn't next to the galvanized pipe.
Right.
Dielectric unions are generally by the copper pipe.
Yeah. And another thing you have to think about with galvanized pipe, if you replace a small section of a galvanized pipe with CPVC and your service panel is grounded through the galvanized pipe, and a lot of them are, a lot of your old homes, because you'll see right out of your service panel, you'll see a clamp connected to your water pipe. If you replace a section, you need to use a jumper. So this is a wire with 2 clamps, and you're going to put a clamp on the galvanized pipe, then you're going to have that section of plastic, and then you need to put a clamp past the plastic and the galvanized pipe on the other side, and then run this jumper wire between the two so that the metal pipe is grounded.
Yeah, we talked about this before.
Yeah, but it's something that a lot of people forget about, especially if you're, you're just doing a section at a time.
Whoops.
With galvanized pipe, this is measured from the inside diameter. So if you have half-inch pipe, the inside diameter is half-inch, and that's like in the U.S., it's all going to be inches. You'll see NPT, that's the National Pipe Thread, or if you see IPS, iron pipe size, and that's measuring from the inside diameter. And most of the supply in older homes, you're going to have half-inch or 3/4, and then your main drain is going to be 1.5 inches coming out of your sinks and tubs and showers. If you plan on doing a lot of projects with galvanized pipe, some top-rated pipe wrenches, the rigid 10-inch cast iron straight pipe wrench was rated very high. The Milwaukee 18-inch, and then Crescent has a 12-inch self-adjusting spring-loaded jaw.
No way.
And so this is very similar to a basin wrench, and there were a lot of really nice reviews on this. And it kind of springs open and you pull it down on top of the pipe. So it's easy, especially in hard-to-reach areas.
Right.
You kind of push it over the pipe and it grabs so you don't have to adjust with your thumb. If you're working on some projects, and let's say you've got some larger pipe, let's say you're trying to unscrew like the 1.5 inch drain pipe, and for extra force, you can slide a pipe over the handle to get more leverage. So there's one study I saw, a 14-inch pipe wrench needs about 64 pounds of force to tighten a 1-inch fitting.
So you should go work out first?
But we should always be working on it. But by adding a pipe that extends the handle to 24 inches, you only need 38 pounds of force to tighten that same fitting. Pretty amazing, huh?
Yes.
If you're in an older home, many of the state municipal guidelines suggest running your water for at least 30 seconds and up to 3 minutes to clean out any contamination debris that accumulates from standing water before you drink it or cook with it.
Yuck.
And the Environmental Protection Commission ran a Run Your Tap campaign to reduce the exposure to lead in these older communities because old pipes, solder, fixtures, over time, if you let it set long enough, it starts to pull it into the water. And the EPA said that Chicago residents should always run their water for at least 30 seconds before drinking or using it for cooking because of all the old pipes and the old supply are lead. And then all around the country, so Michigan, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, New York, and Oregon were some of the top ones. I would check your local guidelines to see if they recommend that you run your water before you drink it or cook it.
Because it's not just the pipes in your house that you have to worry about. It's what's coming to your house.
Right. And that's a lot of it. All this old infrastructure.
Well, I think like the EPA estimated that it would cost like $276 billion to change out all the lead pipes.
Yeah, and decades to get this
like
done.
20 years to do it.
Yeah, fascinating.
Which is kind of scary.
Right, so just run your water 30 seconds.
Do you?
No. That's why it takes so long to do this podcast.
Yeah.
If you have a home built from 1978 to 1995, you might have polybutylene pipe. So
What?
It's marked PB. And it kind of looks like PEX, and this was supposed to be the first really good plastic pipe because it was
Well, what if people don't know what PEX looks like?
Okay, so this is plastic, somewhat flexible pipe, and it's either marked PB2110 or it might be marked with a PB and a group of numbers. And this is no longer used because
since it's got an expiration date on your timeline.
Right, so in the 1980s, they started all these lawsuits because of all these pipes bursting behind the wall, and some would just start leaking without warning, and so it was causing mold behind, in some homes, and then major damage in other homes. They don't know exactly what the problem is, but they believe that it was a combination of sunlight, so these pipes were left out in the sunlight during construction, and the chlorine in water, and it just breaks it down from the inside. So the pipes look perfect, and then without warning, they either start leaking or just burst. And if you have polybutylene pipe, you definitely should start replacing this with copper, PEX, or CPVC.
The sooner the better.
Yes. And if you like the idea of plastic, CPVC has been used since the 1950s. This is chlorinated polyvinyl chloride. It's yellow or beige in color. It contains extra chlorine, so it's safe for drinking. It resists buildup of minerals inside the pipe. Very easy to work with because it's flexible.
Right.
You can use this on the hot or the cold lines, and all you do is use primer and glue to join the sections. So very easy to work with. The most common is a 10-foot stick, and this will hold 100 pounds of pressure at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not very expensive, and the most common size is 1/2 and 3/4 in most homes. With CPVC, it's measured with the outside diameter, or they call it CTS, copper tube size, and where PVC is measured on the inside diameter, CPVC is on the outside diameter.
Why do they do things? Just to make it confusing.
Well, it's so you can't interchange them either, because like a 1/2-inch fitting for CPVC will not fit into a 1/2-inch fitting for PVC, so you're not mixing and matching, different types of plastic.
So keep it one color.
Right. And then with this, you'd want to use a tubing cutter for the best fit when you're connecting the pipe into your fitting. And it cuts very easy with a tubing cutter. You can use a saw, but you need to make sure that you're removing any burrs with a utility knife or emery cloth inside and out.
Right. So in the store, the CPVC, the fittings are all going to be a lot smaller than the PVC.
Right, in its relative size. So a 1/2-inch will be smaller than a 1/2-inch PVC.
Right, and it's going to be separated. All CPVC will be together. PVC might be on the same side, but it'll be separated.
Grouped together, right.
Although sometimes the employees don't put it in the same spot or the right spot.
In this plastic family, you have ABS, and this is black in color, and this is used for your drain lines. Primarily 1.5-inch, 3-inch, and 4-inch is the most common. And this isn't going to rust or corrode. It's inexpensive. It's lightweight. It's been used in homes since the 1970s. Very easy to repair. The most common size or code for drain is Schedule 40, and that's just the wall thickness. And this is measured from the inside diameter, and it's going to come in solid or rigid pipe 10 or 20-foot lengths. And ABS is very popular on the West Coast, but it's not allowed in all communities. So I would check with your local village or your hardware store to see if it's allowed. And PVC, so the white pipe, is allowed everywhere in the country. But you can cut PVC or this rigid pipe with a tubing cutter, but you need to make sure it's the right tubing cutter.
Right.
Because some of the soft rolls of tubing, it's a different cutter, but it's still called a tubing cutter. So you're looking for something that's a ratcheting tubing cutter that's designed for this rigid PVC pipe. Plastic pipe is very easy to work with because it's lightweight, it's flexible. All you're going to do is cut your sections and use glue to connect it all together, so very easy. When you're cutting it, you want to make the cuts as square as possible so it sets into the fittings flush. And if you're using hand saws to do the cutting, you want to make sure that you're removing all the burrs with either a tool, emery cloth, or utility knife on the outside and also the inside. If you're doing drain pipe, you want to make sure that there's no burrs on the inside because that's going to collect hair and grab debris. And I would dry fit all the pieces together first. So cut all my sections, lay it out, dry fit it all together. And if you have quite a few angles where your fittings, let's say your 90-degree turns, need to be a certain way, as you connect two ends and you have one 90 coming one way, another 90 the other way, you want to make sure that those are exact, because when you use that glue, man, after 30 seconds it's done. And so if you mislay one of these, it's going to be very difficult to lay it out. So what I would do is I would dry fit it and then use a marker and put a line against the fitting and the pipe itself and line it up. And then you can also number it 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way down the line. And then think about where your last fitting is going to be, so that sometimes you might want to do a section and then glue two ends and put those two ends together.
Right, so you're not carrying a 10-foot stick.
Right. Or sometimes it's just difficult to wedge it in if you're going around a corner or up through a floor or through a wall. You might want to lay it out and just see where would the last section be to be the easiest to put this together.
So do you have to use primer?
For CPVC and PVC, you need to use primer. For ABS, you don't use a primer. You just use an ABS glue.
Interesting.
So and the reason primer is purple is so that the inspectors can see that you use the primer. It's that important. It's code in almost all communities. So they want to make sure that you use it, because that primer, it's cleaning off the glaze on the surface of the plastic, and it cleans it, and it starts to soften the plastic so that the cement will actually melt it and fuse this together.
The cement?
Yes, so you're using a glue or a cement to fuse the plastic together. It's actually melting the surface, and it melts together, and it creates one solid piece. So you're actually solvent welding. You're blending this together. So the way you would, if you have CPVC or PVC, the way that you would connect your fittings to the pipe is first you would use primer. And your primer is going to have an applicator attached to the lid. I would wear disposable gloves. Make sure you're in a well-ventilated area, because this stuff is toxic and flammable. And the approach for this is when you're applying your primer to the fitting, you're going to use the primer on the fitting, then you're going to put it onto the pipe, and then a second coat on the fitting. I would hold my fitting so the opening is pointing down so that none of this primer pools inside the fitting. So you're going to put a thin amount of the primer inside the fitting. You're going to apply some of the primer on the pipe just far enough down the tip that will fit into the socket, and then you're going to put a second coat inside your fitting. With the cement, what you're going to do is you're going to start with the pipe first, put a thin coat on the pipe, a thin coat inside the fitting, and then a second thin coat on the pipe. You're going to push it together, give it a quarter turn, and you're giving it a quarter turn just in case there's a burr or something you don't want to pull off the cement. And you can put your glue on or your cement even while that primer is wet. So put your primer on, and while that primer is still wet, then put your glue on. And hold this together for about 30 seconds, because some of these cements can actually push the fitting and the pipe apart. And then you're going to have one solid connection that is not going to come apart.
Nice.
Then I would wipe off all the excess glue from the outside of the pipe, and this is how I was taught from the manufacturer, but I would check the label on any product you buy. I'm sure there's going to be some differences.
So always follow the directions.
Right. But with CPVC, make sure you're using CPVC glue. The same with PVC or ABS. Use a glue specific to that. When I was taking my training, my trainer said, I hate the all-purpose glue, because these are specific chemicals that these chemists spend years figuring out how it's going to melt just exactly enough so that it fuses. And he said the all-purpose glue, you will never get a great bond compared to using a glue specific for that plastic. And then check the labels too, because different glues will go up to a different diameter.
Really?
And then you also have glues for damp conditions, high temp and cold temp. So spend a few minutes and read the label.
Yeah, buy the right product.
Yeah, well, it's pretty amazing, the variety of these glues. Again, like when I was being trained, they were excited about all the chemistry is involved with this glue.
You sound excited too.
If you're joining a section of ABS to PVC, there's a transition glue that's green, so the inspectors know that you used the proper glue. But in most villages, ABS can only be joined to PVC with a transition coupling. So this is a rubber coupling with a metal sleeve around it, and it has hose clamps that you lock down.
I always wondered what those were for.
And then you can join PVC or CPVC to copper using special fittings, and the push fit fittings are probably the easiest.
Right.
And there's a variety of different types of couplings you can get, but just looking for something that's marked specifically for the material you're using. And then if you have an older home with cast iron drain pipes, you can replace sections of it with PVC, and there's rubber couplings and sleeves to do that. And a common problem is a broken toilet flange going down into cast iron main drain, and you can cut out a short section of that cast iron under the flange and then connect it to a coupling, then a short length of pipe, and either using 3-inch or 4-inch PVC, and you're going to solvent weld a plastic toilet flange to that. And so it's very easy to fix these old cast iron drain pipes. Some of the top rated PVC tubing cutters were Vulcan, VULCAN PVC pipe cutter, and this is ratcheting. Rigid has a couple of really highly rated pipe cutters. Graintex, GRAINTEX, and their ratcheting pipe cutter was rated very high. But make sure you're getting something for rigid pipe and not for the soft tubing. PEX is plastic tubing you can use for hot or cold water, and it's PEX. And this was developed in the 1960s, used in Europe since the 70s, and the US since the 1980s. And this is going to resist scale and pitting and corrosion. It's more insulated than copper. It's quiet. It's inexpensive. There's no glues. You're just either using compression fittings or push fittings on this.
Interesting.
So very easy to put together sections of this. And because it's tubing, it's very easy to put up through walls and, between floors.
And there's a lot of different colors too, right?
Well, it's all for hot or cold. It doesn't matter, but a lot of people will use the red color for all their hot lines so they know what's hot, and then blue for their cold lines. And then you can just get white if you just want to use one color and not worry about
boring.
There's also rigid PEX, but most people are going to use the tubing, the coils, because it's much easier. If you're doing small repairs or you're changing sections of your pipe, you're probably going to either be using fittings with a hose barb, and you're either going to be using a crimp ring or a pinch clamp to connect it, or a push fit fitting. If you're using the crimp rings, you need a tool that's going to be specific to that size.
Right.
And then if you're using the pinch clamp, most homeowners like the pinch clamps because there's a little clamp on the side of this ring, and one tool fits all the sizes. You put it into the tool, and as you start to ratchet this down, you can't remove the tool until it's completely compressed.
Oh, nice.
So that's really nice. With the crimp rings, it's more of a professional tool, and you can rent these too from rental stores. So if you have just a few small repairs, if you don't want to use fittings, then you can use push fit fittings. So SharkBite is one of the top rated, and they're actually rated code behind the wall. Very easy to use. You push it onto the end of the PEX, and what's great about SharkBite is it works with PEX, CPVC, and copper.
Right.
So just very versatile, and that way you can join a couple different types of tubing or pipe together. The downside of PEX is that it can't be exposed to sunlight,
like a vampire.
So it becomes brittle and it will rupture. So most manufacturers, they're putting a UV blocker that's going to last 30 to 60 days, but you don't know, how it's been stored
Right. Well, how is
and
it transported?
Yeah. So that it's a shame.
At the store.
Right.
Well, what about fluorescent lights?
Yeah, they're concerned, and now there's been some research now that they're studying indirect light. So let's say you have exposed PEX in your basement, and you have basement windows open, and it's not direct sunlight, but UV is still coming in, UV from fluorescent lights. So that is a concern.
Well, I'm just thinking in the store.
Right.
I'm sure some of it is sitting there for more than 60 days.
Yeah, well, usually it's packaged pretty well, but if they're opening it up and maybe cutting sections, cutting sections for customers, it is something you have to be concerned about. And then you can always use copper pipe.
Everybody's favorite.
Which is long-lasting, it's strong, it resists fire. You can get solid or rigid sticks, usually 10 foot at the hardware store, or you can get flexible pipe, so it's soft, and you would use the soft tubing for ice makers, dishwashers, humidifiers. Copper is bacteriostatic, so it's going to resist bacterial growth, it resists corrosion. The only problem with copper is if you have high acidic water, it can leach copper from the pipe.
Well, I would think having high acidic water is a problem anyway.
And it can also split when it freezes, but most pipe. I mean,
right.
It's a problem, if it freezes. The most popular type of solid copper pipe is M. The lettering is going to be red. and it's the least expensive. And copper can be expensive depending on the time of year, too. It's kind of like a commodity. For commercial use, heat or underground and drain, you're usually using L, and it has blue lettering on it. And there's 4 main ways you can join solid copper pipe together. One is solder. You can use compression fittings. You can use push fit fittings like shark bite. And then there's a chemical called Just for Copper.
And that would be the easiest.
Absolutely. I had a leak in an elbow off a water heater, so I turned off the
Sorry to hear that.
drained it, and I cut out the pipe from on both sides of this elbow. So I had to have 2 small sections of pipe. I had to put in 2 elbows and a sleeve. What you do is you take either emery cloth, sandpaper, or a tool, and you want to clean the copper. It needs to be bright, so a film develops on the outside of copper and the inside of the fittings.
Right.
So you're going to use, let's say, emery cloth. You're going to clean the outside of the pipe down the length that'll fit inside the fitting. You're going to clean the inside of the fitting. You're going to use this and wipe it clean. You're going to use this Just for Copper on the outside of the pipe, the inside of the fitting, and you're going to push them together. You're going to spin it 360 degrees. In 5 seconds, it sets up. In 7 minutes, it's cured, and you have a 500 psi in 7 minutes. And that lasted for years until I sold that building. And what a simple way to do a repair. If you don't want to solder, or if you don't want to go,
Well, it's easy to use too because it's like in a glue bottle.
But it's chemically welding this together, so it's just a very interesting product, especially if you just have small repairs. I like it a lot. Compression fittings are easy for copper, where you slide your nut on, you slide this compression sleeve onto this, and then you slide your shutoff valve or your fitting, and now you have 2 wrenches. One you're going to hold the fitting with, the other one you're going to tighten down this nut, and you don't want to over tighten it because it's soft metal. And you snug this up, and that sleeve bites into the copper, and you have a watertight fit that fast. The problem with compression is you have to have access to it. It's not code behind wall. And then push fit fittings, like we talked about for PEX, they just slide right over and you're done. They're a little.
I guess that's pretty easy too.
They're a little more expensive, but for small projects, they almost can't be beat. And like the shark bite, it's code behind wall, so you put it together and you're done in seconds. It is pretty amazing. I wish I had these. Never had this when I was doing most of my remodeling.
It's because you're old.
If you want to solder copper together,
I do not. I do not like soldering.
You're going to need a torch. You're going to need flux. You're going to need solder. I would always wear disposable gloves when I'm using flux. You're going to clean, again, if we're connecting a length of pipe, solid pipe, to a fitting, you're going to clean the outside of the pipe till it's bright and shiny, the inside of the fitting, wearing disposable gloves because you don't want to get this flux on you. You're going to put flux on the outside of the pipe. You don't want to miss any spaces, also on the inside of the fitting. Anywhere there's flux, solder is going to flow. If there's flux missing, solder will not go there.
So flux is like the goo?
Yes,
that goes around
it's a paste that goes around, and it's going to pull.
Goo.
It's going to pull the solder in.
And so solder's like on the roll that you're like feeding to it. You're melting it on. Exactly.
So you're going to unroll about 6 or 8 inches of your solder, and I like putting a little 45-degree end on that. And then a great tip: if you're soldering together 1/2 inch copper, you're going to use about a 1/2 inch of solder at each fitting, at each joint. And then if you're soldering 3/4 pipe, you're going to use about 3/4 of an inch of solder at each joint. And that's kind of just an easy way to know, because when I first started, I didn't know, and I was watching these plumbers taking notes, but I never really paid attention how much solder they used. So when I first started soldering, I made sure that there was a lot of solder in there.
You're mesmerized by it too. You're seeing this thing melt.
Yeah, it's cool. It sucks right in there. Yeah, it is magical.
Unless there's any water.
Right. Yeah, and you have to make sure it's dry, because water will just wick away the heat, and it will not get hot enough. You're going to put flux on. You're going to put your pipe into your fitting. You're going to give it a 1/4 turn in case there's a burr on your pipe. And when you cut your copper pipe, make sure that you're using a tubing cutter. It's going to give you the cleanest cut, and it's worth a few bucks for a tubing cutter if you're doing a bunch of projects. You can use a hacksaw, but you want to make sure that you clean the outside of that and deburr it. And you also want to, if you're using a tubing cutter, it's going to have a deburring tool that you put on the inside of the pipe, and you deburr the inside. When you put it in, the pipe into the fitting, you're going to give it a quarter turn, and now you're going to take your torch and you're going to start heating the fitting and the pipe. You're moving it back and forth, the tip of that flame between the fitting and the pipe. After about a minute, now you're taking that length of solder that you've unrolled and you're touching it to the joint. And when it gets hot enough, it'll just suck right in there, and it's just really cool. Like I said, you're going to use about a 1/2 inch for a 1/2 inch pipe, and that's all you need for that. You're going to remove the heat. Once it's cool, you're going to wipe it off. You don't want any flux staying on the surface. Flux will actually break down the copper over time.
Oh, really?
So when it mixes with the solder, you're not going to have a problem. It chemically changes it, but the flux on the pipe itself, you want to wipe all that clean.
Get all the goo off.
If you're doing anything where it's close to wood, it's flammable.
You think?
So I would protect that with fireproof cloth or any delicate surfaces.
Or have a fire extinguisher next to you.
Absolutely. And I would wear leather gloves too when I'm soldering. So you want to wear gloves when you're applying the flux, either disposable plastic or leather, but you don't want that on your skin. And then when you're soldering, it gets hot.
Yes.
So, and if you're doing lengths, you want to start soldering from the lowest position and work your way up rather than from the top down, because you'll melt everything above your fittings. If you have two sides of a sleeve, let's say, or a coupling, if you go from the top down, it'll dissolve everything above it. So you want to start from low and work your way high. A couple of the top-rated propane torches, Bernzomatic, so it's Bernzomatic, and Mag Torch, MAG. And I just picked up a new Mag Torch, and it's really cool.
Really? You're just going to spell mag, not torch?
Torch. And this thing is self-lighting. So I've always had just the torch heads where you could adjust it, and then I needed that spark lighter. So it's that tool that has a little piece of flint and a steel cap, and it shoots the sparks, which I really kind of like.
Yeah,
it's kind of fun. But it's really nice to get these self-lighting torches. So you just pull the trigger, and it has everything inside that ignites it, and it's adjustable. And then the trigger also has a lock. So once you depress it, you can press this lock, and you don't have to hold that trigger down.
Oh, yeah, because that's a drag.
Yeah. So really nice. And then the best rated tubing cutters, and one you'll see everywhere, is from Rigid. Milwaukee and Klein really have nice professional grade and very highly rated.
Do you have anything else to add? Because I didn't think we'd talk this long about types of pipe.
I would say do a drawing, like we've talked about some of our other projects. If you're replacing a lot of pipe, I would put together a little drawing so I know exactly how much pipe, the different fittings I'll need.
Make a list. Because, like, if you're in the middle of soldering and you need another elbow, that's kind of a drag.
Right. So create a drawing, create a nice parts list, and then all the accessories you need to put it all together. For quick and easy, the push fit really does a nice job, and especially for fittings, it's really a nice way to replace it. Whenever you're changing a fitting, I would always use just the quarter turn shutoff valves too. I would never use the multi-turn anymore. And then one thing I didn't mention for the compression fittings, when you're using copper pipe, and if you're using a compression fitting for 1/2 inch pipe, it's actually going to be a 5/8 compression fitting. So compression fittings are always going to be an 1/8 inch larger than whatever your pipe size is.
Just to make it more confusing.
Right, exactly. So if you're working with 1/2 inch pipe, you're going to be using a 5/8 compression, 3/4 inch pipe, a 7/8 compression fitting.
Duh. Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast in iTunes, Stitcher, the Google Play Music app, or the Spotify mobile app.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our book, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, on Amazon.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.